Welcome to Opening Ideas, where we're either opening hardware, software, or your mind. Today's guest, I think, will not only open your mind, but I think he'll probably open your heart. And the reason why I say that is because when I first met Alex Kajitani, I fell in love with him. Not like in a creepy way or anything like that, but I just thought to myself, I love this guy. I need to meet this guy. He was a keynote at a conference that I too was speaking at, and I fell in love with him immediately. So, Alex, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience? Give the audience a little bit of a flavor of how you got to do what you do.
Yeah, thanks so much. It is absolutely an honor to be here and to be with you. And I remember meeting you as well. That was a great time and my first time ever in Alaska. But my name is Alex Kajitani. I'm the 2009 California Teacher of the Year, and I was a top 4 finalist for National Teacher of the Year. I'm a speaker, an author, and I'm actually best known around the world as the Rappin Mathematician. And so I've found some ways to get creative after my students were having a real hard time getting engaged and understanding the math that I was teaching, but I realized they could remember every single word to every rap song on the radio. So one day I began rapping about the math that I was teaching, and long story short, I'm now known around the world as the Rappin Mathematician.
I love it. I love it. So, audience, what you need to know is that when I first met Alex a long time ago, he had talked about a book that he had recently published, and so I got myself one. It's Inspiration for Teachers. It's based on the Chicken Soup for the Soul type books, the whole series of those, and his 101 stories are specifically about inspirational teacher stories. And so I read it, front to back, probably 1 or 2 sittings only, and I just loved it. And then Alex wrote for our magazine. We publish a quarterly magazine called Strive. He wrote for our magazine, and I loved it, and his contribution was very well received. And so then I hooked back up with Alex just a few months ago, and I found out that he had published his 3rd book, this one, 101 Tips for Teaching Online. And I thought to myself, this man needs to be on our show. But bring us to what brought this book to your mind in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great topic. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm known now as the Rappin Mathematician. What happened was once I started rapping about the math that I was teaching, my students actually said, "Hey, Mr. Kajitani, you got to start filming some of this and putting it on YouTube." And so we started together with my students making these rap music videos, putting them online, and they ended up getting hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. And that was really my first lesson in teaching online, because all of a sudden I was taking what I was doing with these 30 kids in my classroom, and suddenly hundreds of thousands of kids and teachers were using these videos, across the globe, in their classrooms, in their homes, to get engaged in math and to make math meaningful to their lives, and to actually understand the mathematical concepts. And so that was years ago, but ever since then, I've really seen the power what happens when we can teach online. Now, teaching online also comes in lots of different forms. And so what we saw when the COVID-19 shutdown first happened, when all of the schools shut down, what we saw were most educators really rushed to, okay, how do I take the old reality and put it online, right? How do I take what I was doing? How do I take what I need to do for the rest of the year? And how do I just deliver it over, Zoom or over any sort of other online platform? And then some teachers were kind of successful, some teachers not so much, same with the students. But then eventually, as time passed, we started to stop asking that old question of how do we take the old reality and put it online? And we started asking, okay, how do we use this to create a new reality so that our students can be successful? And so that's really what got me really excited. As I talk to teachers all over the country, as I talk to parents and students, what's working, what's not working, what's the best of what you've seen. And so this book is really, it is a collection of the best strategies that are highly effective that teachers can use while they're teaching online. Some teachers are teaching in a hybrid environment where they've got to go back and forth to teaching in person and online. So the good news is all of the strategies transfer. Engaging students online is rooted in the same philosophy as engaging students in an in-person classroom. But I just got so excited about this possibility because while we saw a lot of students really struggle, while we saw a lot of parents really struggle with online teaching, we also saw students who started to thrive. We also saw teachers who started to thrive. And we also saw the potential for delivering instruction and making learning happen in all sorts of new and unique contexts, which really has benefited a lot of our students.
So let's start with building relationships. If you could tell our audience, in a few minutes or less, what your tips are, knowing that we have either a remote learner or a hybrid learning environment, what would be your top tips to build the relationship between students and teachers, students, and then students and content?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first of all, there's a lot of different definitions of relationships out there, right? If I asked everybody listening today to write down their definition of a relationship, we'd probably have a lot of different definitions. But essentially, what a relationship is it's a connection, right? You can have connections that are growing, connections that are weakening. But what we know for sure, especially in the educational space and really in all spaces, is that strong relationships are really built on three things. First of all, they're built on time together, right? There's no shortcuts on this one. You whether the time can be in person, the time can be virtual, but we've got to spend some actual live time with the people that we are building relationships with. So that's one critical component. The second one is the same thing I tell my students when they go for their first job interview, which is you got to be interested and you got to be interesting, right? All of us have been in relationships where we were very interested in the person but they weren't so interested in us, or maybe it was the other way around. They were very interested in us but we weren't that interested in them, right? Doesn't make for a strong relationship. That's especially critical as teachers, especially critical as educators. We've got to be really interested in our students because they're very fascinating people. At the same time, we've got to make ourselves very interesting because you know what? We're very fascinating people. And the third component really is trust. I heard a definition of trust recently that I absolutely love, which is that trust is confidence with the unknown. Let me say that again. Trust is confidence with the unknown. If there is one thing that we've learned over the past couple of years, it's that like we don't know what's going to happen next year, right? We don't know what's going to happen next month. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But when we know that the people that we've surrounded ourselves with have our back, when we know that we've got confidence that whatever happens, we're going to be able to get through it, that's when real trust is formed. And so, those three things, whether they're online, whether they're in person, really go into building those relationships with students. Now, that being said, what can we do as educators? What can we do as anybody who's working with people online? The first one is, it's so simple yet it's so high level, and that is three words: take the time. Right? We've just got to take the time to, hey, what is that on the, whether maybe we see a student who's on the camera and we say, oh, tell me a little bit about that picture behind you over your shoulder, or hey, what is it? One of the things that I do is I always find out just one activity or hobby that all of my students love, and then I just keep it on a little sheet of paper next to my desk. And then if we're studying angles, I can say, hey, Javier, I know that you really like soccer, right? We're going to be studying angles today. I know that's a big deal in soccer. Or if we're cooking, or if we're talking about fractions and one of my students loves cooking, I can just bring that in. And so it's just those little tiny things sometimes that are really important to take the time, just mention it. And then, I know we're going to talk about engagement later, but suddenly the student can't do anything except being engaged because, whoa, my teacher took the time to just mention something that they know that I'm interested in. And so, again, be interested, be interesting, and really just start to develop that trust, which I have found and which you can read about in the book, can absolutely be done when we're doing it in a virtual or an online environment.
Okay. Okay. And let's talk about committing to equity. Maybe tell us your top tips to commit to equity that a reader might find in your book.
Yeah, and that is, I think, something that's a great topic, Heather. And I think that's something that we really saw during this pandemic was, you know, there was already a divide between students who had access to and those that didn't have access to. And you can fill in whatever you want after the word to, right? But one of the things that we really saw was this great digital divide where the students who had access to devices, who had access to to really solid internet and internet connectivity, they were able to log on and kind of, with several hiccups, but essentially continue with their education. Students who had access to online courses or, homeschool courses of, people that could help to aid them through this, um, really, were able to continue their education. Students who didn't have access to a device, who didn't have access to, a good internet plan, suddenly they were, essentially left out. And so that was one of the things that I think as an educational system, we did pretty well, or that we're doing pretty well. Not perfect, and we're still working on it, but we saw that and we started to really make moves to get the students the devices, get the Chromebooks to the students who didn't have them. I have read articles and talked to several educational administrators who said, okay, we've got to go put up hotspots in different neighborhoods and things like that so that the students at least have a shared place that they can go, during school hours in order to get onto the internet, in order to make sure that their service isn't interrupted. Sometimes it can't comes to like the basic things, right? So many of our students receive free or reduced price lunch, right? And all of a sudden, with schools closed, they didn't have anywhere to go to eat breakfast. They didn't have anywhere to go to eat lunch. And they, really depend on those services. And so, incredible stories about food services and school districts who packed up the lunches and put them on buses and then went and distributed them throughout the neighborhood. I'll never forever forget. I had one student named Luis, and this was pre-pandemic, but I think about this all the time. It was the very last day of school, and he was an eighth grader in the middle school that I was teaching. So we did the promotion ceremony early, and then the eighth graders were all allowed to leave and go home and start their summer early. Well, Luis, he came to my classroom. And he said, "Hey, Mr. Kajitani, is it okay if I hang out here in your class until the end of the day?" And I said, "Sure, but you can go home if you want to. You can start your summer." He said, "I know, I just want to hang out." And I said, "Hey, Luis, tell me, like, why would you want to hang out here when you could go home?" And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "I just want to eat the free lunch one more time before I go home all summer to nothing." And I always hold him, in my heart in that situation, that our students come to us for so many reasons. They come to us to eat, they come to us, to learn, they come to us for the relationships and to hang out with their friends. But at the basis of it all is that we've got to make sure that all of the students are getting what they need. I heard a great definition. It was from Lavelle Brown, who is the superintendent of the Ithaca School District, and he said that equity is reducing the predictability of who succeeds and who fails. When we get our students the devices that they need, when we get our students access to top quality teaching and schools, when we get our students the resources that we need, when we take the time to get to know them, then we're really reducing the predictability of who succeeds and who fails. And I have come to believe that when online teaching is done correctly, when online teaching is done in an effective, engaging manner, we really have this opportunity to reduce that predictability, because now we can provide high quality education anywhere to anyone, and somebody is no a student is no longer dependent on the neighborhood that they live in, the zip code that they were born in order to get access to high quality education.
Right. I love it. I love it. Now you've talked a little bit about, various ways that you can do that, but specifically for, that hybrid classroom or the fully remote classroom, what are your tips for educators to not only, ignite engagement, but sustain engagement throughout the school year or throughout that one lesson?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've got 3 tips. So this sounds so simple, and yet I see teachers not doing it all the time, and then the teachers who I do see it, it immediately sets the tone for the classroom, and that is to say hello to the students as they are logging in, right? I call it the number 1 classroom management strategy of all time. When students come into our in-person classrooms, right? Well known. It's well, widely considered highly effective teaching to stand at your door, greet them as they come in, right? Because you're setting the tone. You're saying, "Hey, I see you. I'm ready for you. Come on in here. Let's get started." When we're teaching in an online environment, same thing, right? As students are logging in, "Hey, Carrie, how you doing? Hey, Devin, how you doing? Hey, Jaime, how you doing? Come on in here. It's good to see you," right? Just saying hello immediately upon them showing up sets the tone that this is going to be an engaging class. Look, let's be honest, right? You are not engaged until you are emotionally involved. Think about what it means to be engaged to someone or in an activity. Until you are emotionally involved in that activity, you're not actually engaged. And so the easiest thing that we can do is say hello. And even though the end of class sometimes gets a bit rushed, if we can say goodbye to all of our students, one of the things that I do is, I don't have time to say goodbye to every student at the very end of class. But what I'll do is I'll count to 3, and on the count of 3, I hit the unmute button, and all the students wave and say goodbye, right? We often focus on saying hello. We sometimes forget to say goodbye, but it's saying goodbye to the students that gets them wanting to come back the next day. The other thing I learned, when we say hello to a student, sometimes that is the first time that an adult has acknowledged them since they left school the day before. So we can never underestimate how powerful it is to say hello to somebody. The second tip for, really providing engaging online instruction, it's simple yet it's so high level, is to just tell stories, right? If you've got a funny story, if you've got a great story about your life, about something that has to do with the curriculum that you're teaching, telling a story and taking a moment to tell a funny story. And it doesn't have to be a story about the time you hiked Mount Kilimanjaro or saved somebody from a burning car, right? Doesn't have to be some crazy epic story. It could just be about the simple things, the funny things that happened to you, the other day or over the weekend. But students, when they get to know our stories, then they get to know us. And that's what keeps them engaged. My own kids, they took a science class with a wonderful teacher named Mr. Ben. They still talk about the story that Mr. Ben told about when he came across the world's deadliest spider, right? The brown recluse spider. And they tell this story over and over again. What Mr. Ben's done, though, is he's created a connection. He's created something engaging for the kids. And the third tip is, whenever possible, just make it real, right? Stop trying to take the content and forcing it into the students' lives, and instead take the students' lives and see where it fits into the content. And so, whenever we can refer to something that is important to the students and their lives in what we're teaching, that's really going to get them engaged. And so I will tell you also, I play a very fun game in my class called the Math Professor. It doesn't have to be math. It can be any topic at all. But I just say to the students, hey, think of something that you think has nothing to do with math, and I'll try to somehow relate it to math, anything from your life. And if you can think of something that has nothing to do with math, you can win a prize. And so, middle school, they bring up ketchup and we talk about calories and cost production, or my students are really into soccer. So we talk about distance and angles and keeping score. I will admit, once I was almost stumped. A student said, I know something that has nothing to do with math. I said, what? They said, love. And I couldn't think of anything. And just as I was about to admit defeat, another student said, I know what love has to do with math. I said, what? They said, when you're in love, that could be very expensive. Another student said, I know. I said, what? They said, in math, 1 + 1 = 2. But if you're in love and you're not careful, 1 + 1 could equal 3.
Three.
Of course, that's when I had to use 2 words every teacher must someday use, which is moving on. But again, taking the time to build those relationships, make sure the students, get an equitable education and keep them engaged and emotionally involved in our classroom is just going to keep them learning, thriving, and coming back for more.
Right. I love it. And I just want to say that all three of the highlights of the book, just so you know, you brought them all back to dating. So it's totally relevant for me as well. So we just expanded our audience by, thousands and thousands.
Maybe that'll be our next book, 101 tips for dating online.
Right, exactly. Why not? Why not? So I have so many ideas, so many.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you about, Alex, is specifically for our audience members who are teachers, who are educators at the moment, and that is innovation on the fly. How can they better innovate on the fly when we're talking about online or hybrid classroom environments?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think first of all, innovations is so often seen as, if you're going to be innovative, you've got to come up with the most technologically advanced solution or system or, some sort of hack that is going to solve these issues. Innovation, especially in the classroom, is often just identifying what's not working and coming up with the most simple solution. Identifying something that's going wrong and just seeing if we can, solve a problem. Two of the least effective things that any educator can ever say is, that won't work, I'm not going to try it. Or sometimes even worse, I tried that once, it didn't work, right? Of course it didn't work, right? Of course it didn't work after you tried it once. Sometimes, especially with students, right? We've got to try things, we've got to rethink them, we've got to try them again. Like, why teaching is so messy sometimes? Because there's real people involved, because there's real students involved, and things get really, really messy. And so, as far as innovation goes, and as far as the mindset and the approach goes, I'll never forget what my first principal, David Geck, ever said to me my very first week of teaching. He said, a truly effective teacher can teach with a plot of sand and a stick. And I always thought that, now, I've used it all, right? I've used smart boards, I've used calculators, I've used Zoom, every online platform there is. I've used the whiteboard, I've made my own flashcards, like you name it, I've used it. But at the heart of what we do as educators is we explain stuff to students, right? We take a concept and we kind of go, okay, how can I just explain this? And so a lot of times we focus on the technology, right? Oh, I can't teach this without my smartboard, or I can't teach this without my overhead. Instead, pull it all the way back, right? Pull it all the way back and say, how would I teach this with a plot of sand and a stick? How would I teach this if I only had a blank piece of paper and a pencil? And then build it out from there. But, never forget what it is that we do as teachers, and that is that we've got to just be able to explain stuff to students. Now, when we can throw in a story, when we can throw in the relationship that we've built with our students because we know their needs and we know something that they love, when we can start to combine and put in place all of the things that we know make for good teaching, then we, severely reduce even that need to innovate on the fly. But at the heart of it all is, look, we're teachers. Things are going to go wrong sometimes. We've just got to be real about it. And, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, blew that one. I'm going to figure out some ways. I'm going to research some ways. I'm going to talk to some colleagues on how to innovate this issue. And I'll be back stronger tomorrow.
All right. Well, Alex, I got to tell you, the very first dog ear in my book here, when I got this earlier this week, was I dog-eared the the Remember What Teachers Do page, where you specifically talked about your first principal, David Geck. And he said, a truly great teacher can teach with a plot of sand and a stick. And I'm telling you, we've come a long way from a plot of sand and a stick. But I love how you brought it all back, that when all is said and done, when we strip away technology, when we strip away all of the expectations on teachers, it comes back down to that simplicity. If you had a plot of sand and a stick, how would you teach that student? I can't thank you enough for joining us today, Alex. I am almost positive that my forecast was correct and our audience is in love with you. Because if I'm in love with you, how can they not be in love with you? So anyway, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's been absolutely a pleasure. And listen, I never, ever, ever want to be the guest that somebody hears from and never hears from them again. So please, 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 I'm a real person. You can get a hold of me through my website, alexkajitani.com. And if you're looking, again, for some innovative ways to teach online, make sure you check out the book. And I'd love to talk to you about it at any point. But, really to all the educators out there, thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you do. I know that this has been a very rough, if not the roughest couple of years ever. And all forecasts are looking that it's not going to get a whole lot easier much quicker. But let's be in it together. Let's all have each other's backs. And if I can help support you in any way, please reach out. And Heather, to you and the team, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everyone. Well, that wraps up this segment on opening ideas. I hope you found Alex Kajitani's insights to be valuable. I know I did. So Alex's information can be found down in our comments section. So it's not just his contact information. And you heard him. He's welcoming you to reach out and ask him any questions or engage with him in a way that makes more sense to you. So not just his contact information is down there in the comments, but also information about his 3 books. I've only read the first 2, but he had a 3rd one in between those 2 that I think as an educator, you'll find to be highly valuable. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with us today. And until next time.